Welcome to the Psychology Undergrad.
Today, we are getting into one of the biggest, maybe the biggest question in social psychology.
Yeah, the foundational one. Who am I?
It sounds so simple, right? But the answer is incredibly complex. We're going to do a deep dive into the research that looks at the self, our identity, our self-esteem.
And all the ways we get it wrong. Our mission today is to pull out the key nuggets on how we manage who we are in different situations. You know, from how you act on Instagram versus in the classroom.
And we're going to look at what the research says really makes us feel, adequate.
We've got some really surprising stuff, like why your friends might know you better than you know yourself.
And why buying things for other people actually makes you happier than buying things for yourself.
Plus, we'll get into a really simple psychological trick called self-affirmation that can boost academic performance for years. It's pretty wild.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with the self we show everyone else. The public self.
Right, the performance.
Exactly. We have to start with this idea of self-presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a new idea. I mean, Shakespeare was all over it.
Oh, yeah, the whole all the world is stage and all the men and women merely players thing.
That quote holds up so perfectly today, doesn't it? We are always adopting different roles, different selves, depending on who we're with.
You're just a different person with your parents than you are with your friends. But the stage has changed. It's not wood and curtains anymore.
It's glass and fiber optics.
Totally. Social media. The research we're looking at defines sites like Facebook as a genuine social environment. It's not fake. It's a real public forum for building your identity.
And it creates this permanent record, doesn't it? Your photos, your opinions, your life events, it's all there, documenting your personal growth, or at least your perceived growth over time.
And that's where the performance gets really detailed. Online, you have what the research calls the crafting advantage.
What's that?
Well, think about it. In a face-to-face conversation, it's all spontaneous. But online, when you're writing a post or choosing a photo,
you have time. You can edit. You can delete and start over.
Exactly. You have all this extra time to compose and craft the exact image you want to project.
Which lets you optimize. The data shows that because of this, people tend to portray themselves a little more positively than they are in reality.
It's not about making things up, not usually. It's about picking the highlight reel.
Right. You're building a slightly enhanced, maybe a more polished version of yourself.
But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. The second you put that image out there,
you lose control over it.
Instantly.
That's the big risk of this modern stage, isn't it? You can have this perfect professional profile, and then a friend tags you in some awful photo from 5 years ago.
And we all know that employers are looking, admissions committees are looking. They find stuff that might totally contradict the story you're trying to tell.
It's a real tension. And the research points out that younger users, who kind of grew up with all this, tend to be a bit more relaxed about privacy.
Yeah, for them, public sharing is almost the default, whereas older users are way more guarded. But for everyone, that tension is there. You post it, you lose ownership of the narrative.
Okay, so this next point is a real challenge to our common sense and honestly to the whole self-help industry.
Yeah. Oh, this is a big one.
The intuitive idea is, I know myself best, full stop. I have access to my feelings, my intentions, my thoughts. Things no one else can see.
It sounds so logical, but that's exactly what makes us so inaccurate. That access to our intentions is what blinds us.
How so?
Well, you have that inner voice saying, I really intend to be on time, or I'm definitely going to study tonight. You give yourself credit for the intention.
While someone watching you just sees that you were late again.
Exactly. You confuse the effort, the trying, with the actual outcome. An observer only sees the behavior.
So we're basically unreliable narrators of our own lives.
In many ways, yes. And to prove this, there's this amazing study by Vizier and Mel. They got really creative.
What did they do?
Instead of just asking people questions, they had them wear a small digital audio recorder.
Like a bug.
Kinda. It would turn on and record ambient sounds for a few seconds every 12.5 minutes over 4 days.
Whoa! So it created an objective log of what they were actually doing.
Exactly. How often they were talking with friends or in class or arguing. Behavior, completely stripped of intention.
Okay, so what did they find?
Well, the finding was a huge blow to the idea of self-supremacy when it came to predicting actual everyday behaviors.
Yeah.
Others, like friends or partners, were sometimes more accurate at predicting the person's behavior than the person themselves.
No way. That's wild.
It is. Because your friend doesn't hear your internal monologue about how you're trying to be more social. They just see how many parties you actually go to. They're just counting the data points.
This changes the whole definition of self-knowledge.
It really does. And what's interesting is that we seem to have some awareness of our own bias.
What do you mean?
When people are asked later to think about it, they tend to admit they might have rated themselves overly positive on really desirable traits, like intelligence or how attractive they are.
So deep down, we kind of know we're fudging the numbers a bit.
A little bit, yeah. The bias is automatic, but we can become aware of it if we're prompted.
So since we're all managing these impressions constantly, what are the actual tactics we use? What's in the toolbox?
Well, the most obvious one is self-promotion.
Right. Highlighting the good stuff. Your awards, your good grades, telling a funny joke to show you have a good sense of humor.
And it serves two purposes. You're trying to convince other people, obviously, but you're also trying to convince yourself.
You reinforce your own story.
Exactly. The more you perform that competent person narrative, the more it feels true to you.
Okay, then there's this other, almost opposite pole called self-verification.
This one's fascinating. It's the drive to get others to agree with the way we already see ourselves. And this need for consistency is so strong, it can actually override the desire for praise.
So if I think I'm a shy person, I'll actually prefer it if someone agrees with me, even though shy can be a negative label.
Yes. You'll behave in ways that confirm it, and you'll feel more comfortable around people who see you that way. Consistency feels safe and predictable. We'd rather be understood, even for our flaws, than get confusingly positive feedback.
But the research points out a huge exception to this rule.
Yes. Physical attractiveness.
We don't want verification if we think we're unattractive.
Not at all. If someone close to you confirms your low opinion of your looks, you're way more likely to reject that than if they confirmed you were bad at, say, math.
That says a lot about what we prioritize as a society, doesn't it?
It really does. Consistency is great, but not when it comes to our appearance.
All right, what else?
We have ingratiation and self-deprecation, two sides of the same coin.
Ingratiation is basically sucking up, right? Praising someone to get them to like you.
The classic buttering up. But it's super high risk. If the other person thinks you're being insincere or manipulative,
It backfires instantly.
and you just look like a brown noser, then the opposite is self-deprecation. You lower expectations.
I'm going to totally bomb this test.
Exactly. Or, wow, you're so smart, I could never do that. You're gaining favor through a show of humility, or you're managing expectations so failure doesn't sting as much.
And what about just, lying?
The research shows college students report telling lies pretty often, maybe twice a day on average.
But these are mostly white lies, right?
Overwhelmingly. They're lies to protect someone's feelings or just to make a social situation go smoothly. Not usually malicious, self-serving lies. It's social grease.
And that brings us back to the online world. People are constantly presenting their ideal self over their actual self, the person they wish they were.
They're projecting their aspirations, but like we said, there's a limit.
Because your friends know the real you.
Right. You can only stretch that truth so far before your offline reality comes crashing in and verification just fails.
Okay, we've talked about the public self, the performance. Now let's go inside. How good are we at actually knowing ourselves through introspection?
This is where psychology really throws a wrench in the works. The whole self-help world is built on the idea of looking within.
But the research says that's not great advice.
Often, it's terrible advice. The issue is called the trouble with introspection. We think we can just look inside and find the reasons for our actions, but we often can't.
Why not? I mean, they're my reasons.
Because we don't have conscious access to the real drivers, the unconscious feelings, the automatic habits. So instead, our conscious brain does something brilliant. It makes up a story.
It confabulates.
Perfectly put. It generates a plausible, but often totally inaccurate story after the fact to explain why we did what we did.
There's a study about this with jam, right?
The classic jam study, or the one about romantic partners. If you ask someone to list all the reasons why they love their partner, they'll list a bunch of easy-to-say things.
Like he has a nice smile, or she's a good cook.
And here's the crazy part. For a little while after making that list, their overall attitude toward their partner might actually shift to match those simple reasons. They might feel less in love because they focused on superficial things instead of the deep, hard-to-articulate emotional bond.
So introspection can actually mislead you about your own feelings.
It absolutely can, especially when your feelings are deep and not based on a simple, logical list.
And this inaccuracy doesn't just apply to the past, right? It extends into the future.
Take time. We are terrible at predicting how we're going to feel in the future. It's called effective forecasting.
We get the emotion right, maybe like losing a job will be bad, but we get the intensity and the duration all wrong.
All wrong. And the main reason is something called the focus problem.
Okay, break that down.
When you imagine a big negative event like getting fired, you focus exclusively on that one terrible thing. You imagine the sadness, the fear.
And you just zoom in on it.
You zoom in and you completely forget about everything else in your life that will still be there.
Your friends, your hobbies, a good cup of coffee in the morning.
All of it. And you also forget that you have a psychological immune system. We are amazing at coping and adapting, so we predict we'll feel way worse for way longer than we actually do.
Life just sort of goes on.
It does, and the same thing happens for positive events.
So you think winning the lottery will make you happy forever?
Right, you focus on the mansion and the travel, but you forget about the new daily hassles, the paperwork, people asking you for money, the fact that you'll still get stuck in traffic.
So you dramatically overestimate how happy it'll make you.
Exactly. Our ability to predict our own emotions is just surprisingly poor.
This failure to know what will make us happy brings us to one of my favorite findings in all of this research. It's about spending money.
Ah, yes. This is the work by Dunn, Acton, and Norton, and it's so powerful.
First, they just ask people,
Yeah.
what would make you happier, spending money on yourself or on someone else?
And predictably, most people say spending it on themselves. That's our intuitive, introspective answer. I buy something for me, I get the benefit.
Makes sense.
But the data showed the complete opposite.
What did it show?
People who spent more of their money on others, giving gifts, donating to charity, reported being significantly happier.
And this wasn't just for rich people, right?
Nope. This held up across all income levels, even in different cultures. It seems to be a fundamental human thing.
And they didn't just stop at a correlation. They proved it caused the happiness.
That's the key part. They did experiments where they gave people money, say $5 or $20. They randomly told half to spend it on themselves by the end of the day.
And the other half to spend it on someone else.
Yep. And the group that spent it on others reported being significantly happier that evening.
That is just, it's profound. Our own intuition about what will bring us joy is completely wrong.
It's a perfect example of introspection failing. And it provides this incredible scientific backing for what so many moral and religious traditions have been saying for thousands of years.
That giving is better than receiving.
Exactly. We think of it as a sacrifice, but the data says it's an objective pathway to our own well-being.
So if looking inward is so unreliable, how do we actually get better self-knowledge?
We have to try and see ourselves the way other people see us. Take the observer stance.
Which brings us back to the actor-observer bias. As the actor, I explain my own behavior based on the situation. I was late because of traffic.
Right. But an observer is more likely to explain your behavior based on your personality. He was late because he's disorganized. They see the pattern, not the excuse.
And that's the key. We can do this for ourselves. The research on the past self shows that when we think about who we were 5 years ago,
We naturally become an observer.
we describe our past self in more stable, trait-like terms. I used to be so impulsive, not I did an impulsive thing because of the situation.
Exactly. So the practical advice here is to try and look at your own patterns of behavior from that outside perspective. Find the consistencies. That's where the real self-knowledge is.
So introspection isn't totally useless then.
No, not totally. It's useful when you're analyzing a conscious, thought-out decision. But if your behavior is driven by emotion or habit, introspection is more likely to confuse you than help you.
Okay, let's shift gears from knowing the self to the structure of the self. Social identity theory tells us that our identity isn't this one solid thing.
No, it's fluid. It's constantly shifting on what's called the personal versus social identity continuum.
So depending on the situation, we're at a different point on that line.
Right. And where you are on that line determines who you compare yourself to.
Let's start with the personal identity end of things.
Okay, so here, you're defining yourself by what makes you unique. The comparison is intragroup. How am I different from other people in this specific group I'm in right now?
So at a family dinner, I might see myself as the liberal one compared to my more conservative relative.
Exactly. But then you go to a political protest, and suddenly you might feel like the reserved one compared to the really passionate activists. Your identity shifts with the comparison group.
Okay, so that's personal identity. What about social identity?
On that end of the continuum, you're defining yourself as a member of a group. The comparison is intergroup. What does my group have in common that makes us different from that group?
So if gender is what's important in a situation, I might start thinking of myself in terms of stereotypes associated with being a woman, like being caring or warm.
Compared to men.
Right.
You're highlighting the group identity.
But this creates a paradox, right? We have all these different, often contradictory selves. The student self, the party self, the family self. How do we feel like one coherent person?
It's called the coherence illusion. And the trick is, we're really good at compartmentalizing. We almost never think about our conflicting identities at the same time.
We only activate one or two at a time.
Right. And if a conflict does pop up, say your party self and your good student self are clashing, you just decide that one of them isn't that important to your core identity, you downplay it.
Oh, partying isn't who I really am?
Exactly. That's how you maintain that feeling of being a single, stable person.
That flexibility becomes a real survival tool when we face rejection or prejudice.
It really does. If you think you're going to be rejected for who you are, you have two basic options. You can try to conceal it, or you can rebel.
Concealment only works for identities that aren't visible, like sexual orientation or a mental health condition.
Right. You hide to try and fit in. But as we'll get to later, that comes with a massive psychological cost.
So what's the other option? Rebellion.
For identities you can't hide, or that are just too important to you to hide, rejection from the mainstream can actually make you lean into it even harder.
You double down on it.
You double down. You emphasize that very feature to set yourself apart from the people who are rejecting you. It's a powerful way of building a new identity.
The sources use the example of visible tattoos or piercings.
Yeah, they serve as a marker. They communicate that you're different from the mainstream, and they strengthen your bond with your own subgroup, your in-group.
And having those strong group ties,
Yeah.
that strong identification with a group, is incredibly important for your health.
Fundamentally important. This isn't just about having a few friends. It's about belonging to groups that give you a sense of meaning and identity.
And the research is clear on this. High identification with valued groups predicts better physical health, less anxiety.
And it significantly lowers the risk of depression relapse. The more meaningful groups you belong to, the higher your personal self-esteem. Your groups become a resource that helps you deal with personal setbacks.
Okay, so all of this, managing our identity, trying to improve ourselves, it takes effort. It takes self-control.
It does. And that brings us to the famous theory of ego depletion.
The idea that self-control is a limited resource, like a muscle.
Exactly. If you use it on one thing, you have less of it available for the next thing.
And the classic studies showed this, right? People who had to resist eating cookies.
Gave up sooner on a difficult puzzle afterward. Or they ate more ice cream in a later task. Their willpower was literally drained.
So what kinds of things drain this resource?
Resisting temptation, obviously, but also controlling your emotions, suppressing thoughts, even just making a lot of complex choices, like trying to stick to a budget while you're grocery shopping.
Now, I have to ask, because I know this is a big debate in psychology right now, what about the replication crisis? Some of these ego depletion studies haven't replicated well.
That's a really important point. And it's true, some of the original really dramatic effects have been hard to replicate. But the core idea that self-control is effortful and can be taxed still has a lot of weight.
So the effect might not be as simple as a tank of willpower gas running out, but the principle holds.
I think that's the best way to look at it. We should still treat self-control as something that requires careful management and can be overwhelmed. It's a skill you have to train and allocate strategically.
Okay, so how do we increase our self-control or manage it better?
The key seems to be focusing on the big picture, on the why you're doing something, not the how.
So focusing on an abstract goal like, I want to be a healthy person.
Is more effective than a concrete one like, I must not eat this specific piece of cake.
Why does that work?
Because the abstract goal connects you to your core values and your identity. It gives the struggle meaning. It reminds you of the overall plan, which makes the temporary discomfort of resisting the cake feel smaller and more manageable.
All right, let's talk about the judge inside all of us. Self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves.
And that feeling is almost entirely based on social comparison.
We have to compare, right?
Yeah.
Because for things like, am I smart or am I kind, there's no objective ruler.
There's no yardstick, so we look to others, and what we're looking for depends on our motive. Usually, it's not accuracy.
It's self-enhancement. We want to feel good about ourselves.
Overwhelmingly. And the consequences of that comparison, whether it makes us feel good or bad, depend entirely on whether our personal or our social identity is active.
This is such a key distinction. Let's break it down. What happens when our personal identity is active?
Then we're using the self-evaluation maintenance model, or SIM. It's all about me as an individual. If someone else does better than me at something I care about, an upward comparison, it's a threat.
I feel jealous. My self-esteem takes a hit.
Right. And if someone does worse, a downward comparison, it's a relief. It's comforting.
Okay, so that's the personal competitive view. What happens when our social identity is active?
Now everything flips. We're using social identity theory. If someone who's in my group, a teammate, a fellow student from our university, does something amazing.
It's not a threat anymore.
No, it's a victory for the whole group. Their success reflects positively on our shared identity. We get to bask in their reflected glory.
And if someone from my group performs poorly?
It's embarrassing. It drags the group's reputation down, so the exact same successful person can be a source of pride or a source of threat.
It just depends on whether you see them as a competitor or a teammate.
That's it exactly. It's all about how you frame the comparison.
So to keep our self-esteem high, we use a lot of cognitive tricks. Self-serving biases.
And the biggest one of all is the above-average effect.
The mathematically impossible belief that almost all of us are better than average at, well, everything.
Driving, honesty, intelligence, you name it. And the research on this is just amazing. They even asked convicted criminals to rate themselves on things like morality and kindness compared to the average person.
And what did they say?
They rated themselves as more moral and more honest than the average community member. The bias is that powerful.
It's almost unbreakable. We take credit for success. I aced the test because I'm smart.
And we blame failure on the situation. I failed because the test was unfair.
We also operate under what are called positive illusions. We are just unrealistically optimistic.
So optimistic. We think we're less likely to get sick or get fired than other people. And we all have experience with this. Think about your daily to-do list.
Oh no. I make a list of 10 things, I do 4 of them, and then the next day I make another list of 10 things.
Exactly. You proceed with the same insane optimism, even though the evidence from yesterday is staring you in the face.
But the research says this is actually a good thing.
Generally, yes. It's considered adaptive. That unrealistic optimism keeps you motivated. It makes you more persistent when you face setbacks. And it's linked to better mental and physical health. Believing you can do it is what gives you the energy to try.
So how do psychologists even measure something as fuzzy as self-esteem?
There are 2 main ways. The first is explicit measures, like the Rosenberg scale. It's a simple 10-item questionnaire.
With statements like, I feel I have a number of good qualities.
Right. It measures your conscious, deliberate attitude toward yourself. The downside is that people might not be totally honest.
The other way is implicit measures.
Like the implicit association test, or IAT. This measures your automatic, gut-level associations between self and positive or negative words. It gets at feelings you might not even be aware you have.
Now, what about trying to fix low self-esteem? The advice is always to use positive self-talk, right?
Yeah. But there's a huge warning label on that. For people who already have high self-esteem, saying, I am a lovable person, works great. It just confirms what they already believe.
But for someone with low self-esteem?
It can actually make them feel worse.
How?
Because the positive statement feels like a lie. It creates this huge, painful gap between that ideal and how they actually feel, which just reminds them of their perceived inadequacy.
That's so counterintuitive.
It is. Finally, we have to remember self-esteem isn't just in our heads. It's massively influenced by our social context.
The data consistently shows men tend to report higher self-esteem than women.
Yes, but crucially, that gap gets smaller in countries where women have more economic and social power, which strongly suggests it's not about gender, it's about societal devaluation.
Your self-esteem reflects how valued your society makes you feel.
Exactly. And you see this in migration studies, too. European Americans who moved from California, where they're the majority, to Hawaii, where they became a minority, saw their self-esteem drop.
Because their social status changed.
The context changed, and their self-evaluation changed with it.
Okay, that brings us to the most direct threats to the self. Prejudice, stigma, discrimination.
When you feel like you're being disrespected or excluded because of your identity, it's a profound blow to your well-being.
And this hits disadvantaged groups the hardest.
Much harder. A big meta-analysis showed that the perception of discrimination is linked to a major drop in quality of life.
And the research is specific about which types are most harmful.
Yes. The strongest negative effects were tied to discrimination based on physical or mental illness, HIV status, and sexual orientation.
For people whose stigmatized identity can be hidden, there's another layer of pain.
This is the concealable identity penalty. People with identities they can hide, like a chronic illness or their sexual orientation, actually report lower self-esteem and more distress than people with visible stigmas.
Why would that be?
Because hiding is exhausting. It's a constant, chronic mental burden. You're always monitoring yourself, always calculating who you can trust.
It leads to feelings of being inauthentic.
Deeply inauthentic. And it prevents you from forming genuine connections with people. So the very thing you're doing to try and belong is the thing that's making you feel isolated. The cost of that cognitive burden is immense.
Another major threat, especially in school or work, is stereotype threat.
This is the fear that you might accidentally confirm a negative stereotype about your group.
Like a woman taking a math test and worrying she'll confirm the stereotype that women are bad at math.
Exactly. And that fear, that anxiety, is enough to disrupt her performance and actually make her do worse.
And the mechanism is really physiological, isn't it? Even if you don't feel consciously anxious.
Your body does. You show nonverbal signs of anxiety, fidgeting, looking away. That anxiety eats up the cognitive resources you need to solve the problems. It clogs up your working memory.
And this can happen to anyone, right? Not just historically disadvantaged groups.
Anyone. They've shown it in studies with white men. Tell them an athletic task measures natural athletic ability. And they do worse because they're being compared to the stereotype about black athletes.
But if you frame the exact same task as measuring sports intelligence,
the threat disappears and their performance goes back to normal. It's all about the situation and the stereotype that's active in that moment.
So what can we do about it? How do you fight it?
The research points to a few key strategies. First, you can affirm an alternative value or talent.
Remind yourself that you're more than just this one test. I may be struggling with this math problem, but I'm a great writer and a loyal friend.
Precisely. Second, exposure to role models. Seeing successful people from your group who defy the stereotype is incredibly powerful.
Like the positive effect of Barack Obama's presidency on the test performance of African American students.
Exactly. And third is a more subtle one called distancing. You mentally distance yourself from the specific negative part of the stereotype without rejecting your whole group identity.
These solutions bring us to what is maybe the most powerful tool in this entire discussion, self-affirmation theory.
This is a game changer. The idea is that our sense of self is a big, flexible system. If you get a threat in one area of your life,
you can shore up your defenses by thinking about a totally different area where you feel good about yourself.
It's like a psychological immune system. And the intervention is so simple. It's usually just a short writing exercise where you reflect on your most important personal values.
Things like your family, your faith, creativity, independence.
Whatever is core to you. And just doing that strengthens your overall sense of self-worth, making you resilient to a specific threat.
And the effects are huge, right? In health, for example.
Huge. Smokers who do a self-affirmation exercise become way more open to reading anti-smoking warnings that they would normally just ignore. They stop being so defensive.
It also acts as a stress buffer.
It absolutely does. It can actually lower the level of stress hormones like epinephrine in your body before a big exam.
But the most incredible findings are in academic achievement.
This is where it's just stunning. A couple of these brief writing exercises at the start of a school year can close the achievement gap for minority students, and the effects last for years.
It creates a positive feedback loop.
That's the key. The affirmation helps them do a little better on that first test. That success boosts their confidence and their sense of belonging, so they do better on the next test. It just builds on itself.
Wow. So how does writing about my family help me on a physics exam? What's the mechanism?
The researchers propose three main pillars. First, it boosts your self-resources. It directly fights ego depletion. By thinking about your strengths and values, you make those resources mentally available again.
Okay, so you have more mental energy.
Pillar two, it broadens your perspective. It helps you see the big picture, the forest instead of the trees. The one stressful test feels less like the end of the world when you've just been thinking about all the other things that make your life meaningful.
It puts the threat in context.
And pillar three is the most important one for the long-term effects.
Yeah.
It decouples the self from the threat.
What does that mean?
Over time, it weakens the automatic link between a stressful event and your identity. So for an unaffirmed minority student, a bad grade might feel like proof that people like me don't belong here.
A confirmation of the stereotype.
Yes. But for an affirmed student, a bad grade is just a bad grade. It's a setback, but it doesn't threaten their entire sense of self-worth or belonging. They can bounce back and stay motivated.
It's a psychological shield.
It's a powerful psychological shield. It doesn't remove the external problems, but it gives you the inner resources to withstand them.
So this has been a really deep dive. We've seen that the self isn't some fixed thing. It's a performance, it's a negotiation, it's totally social.
Yeah, and we've learned that we're often not the best judges of our own lives. Our intuitions about what makes us happy can be way off. Turns out it's things like generosity, not just self-interest.
And your self-esteem isn't just about you. It's deeply tied to your social context, how society treats you, and the groups you belong to. That sense of belonging is just vital.
Absolutely. And the big takeaway for you as a learner is that your identity is a resource. External threats like stereotype threat are real and can mess with your performance.
But psychological tools like self-affirmation are also real. Strengthening your global sense of who you are and what you value provides this incredibly powerful and long-lasting buffer.
So, considering the incredible benefits that come from just focusing on what really matters to you, whether it's your faith, your family, your independence, or your creativity, we'll leave you with a final thought to mull over.
What small, simple, and consistent practice, rooted in your single most important core value, could you integrate into your daily life right now to consciously build up your own psychological resources for the next inevitable challenge?